And Rockefeller said, he said, the person that works all day stays broke, right? So, and that's a little paraphrase, but ultimately what's happening here is time then becomes a commodity that we trade for money. One day, someone invented the stock market, and the stock market was a pretty cool invention in the days where you're like, hey, we have this really big idea, but we don't really have the capital to implement that idea. The example that always comes to my head is like the dude that invented FedEx, right? Freddie's like, I want to get packages pretty much anywhere in the world within 2 days. And then eventually it was when it absolutely positively has to be overnight. Well, that you can't, if you're going to try to do that from bootstrapping, that is going to be a really long thing, because you're like, okay, we have one route we can overnight, right? And then you're like, okay, when that's profitable, then we can get a second route. So the stock market makes sense where you're like, hey, we can issue stock, people can have an ownership in this idea, and then we can have the capital to build out infrastructure. But then the stock market became, you know what would be great is if we could just extract as much value from this as possible when we go public so that we could get a payoff. And then it was a fiduciary responsibility only to shareholders, not to employees or customers, therefore creating fraud on a regular basis, because simply they always are going for growth. Gotta grow, gotta grow, gotta grow, gotta grow, which is why a lot of us have a problem with contentment and have a problem with being present. And we're constantly like, we gotta do more, because it's ingrained in our culture that more is better. And if you don't have more and you don't sacrifice, then you won't succeed. And then we go insane trying to succeed by getting the things that we don't even care that much about at the expense of the things that matter most. And so investing got bastardized to not be an extension of our energy and our money, but to be a relegation of who we are and put our entire lives in someone else's hands. And when it didn't work out, just to feel like a victim. That's what society's become. So I'm of the notion and the thought process where I was like, we had a meeting yesterday where I'm like, okay, I'm no longer doing my captive because I can't invest in anything that matters to me in that. I'm moving it over to the C Corp, and it's all going to be in the NFT world. We're going to build out this entire community of how we're going to deliver our content and engage with our customers and use those platforms. And then I was like, all right, I'm getting a buyout from my company. I told Corey and Norm yesterday, I'm like, all right, this is going to be what we're going to do to juice up everything, to get it out there, to have more reach, and really have a presence in everything that's happening. So that's what investing is to me. And yet people all the time are like, what tech stock should I invest in? Or, what real estate's good? Or is oil and gas a good idea right now? I'm like, I don't know. The fact that you're asking, it's not a good idea for you. You're asking because someone told you that's trying to sell you on that, because that's how they make money. That's where you should invest, because you're not sold on yourself. Yeah. And that's it. That's it. Yeah.
So glad that was recorded.
I'm glad you grabbed the camera for that.
So here's a follow-up question.
Yeah.
If someone didn't have the motivational Garrett, how can we get this thing scalable so that someone can go through an experience and get really, really clear on their investment DNA? i.e., what is the true value of relationship capital? What is the true value of cash flow? Like, I'm telling you, the investment index, investment index is a piece, because there's a world where a real estate deal could get you more cash flow, but in writing a book gets you less cash flow, but more relationships that lead to getting closer.
Okay, so I've written about it just this week in the best way. It's still, your question's critical because I'm not all the way there. Excuse me for just a second. I know I'm interrupting your video, but it's because I'm really excited about this. Disrupting Sacred Cows, my newest book. It's new, it's fresh. It's about all of the things that have to do with our relationship to money, the things that hold us back, and how to, kind of peek into that, be able to resolve that. And ultimately, with the new economy and everything that's happening and moving so quickly, it is timely to help you to have more success in your finances. So go ahead and click the link if you want to grab this book and dive on in. But I'm like, think about this trap. This is crazy. Like, when it hit me, I was like, the trap is I've got to sacrifice to succeed, which means if I don't have the money, I have to do the extra work that instead of have someone else do it. So in an easy level, that is, I got to fix the things around my house. I got to mow my lawn. I've got to do everything that I can't pay anyone else to do because I don't have the money. And then I got to go to work, and I got to work so hard. And Rockefeller said, he said, the person that works all day stays broke, right? So, and that's a little paraphrase, but ultimately what's happening here is time then becomes a commodity that we trade for money. And now we don't have room for creativity and relationships, because think about it, the person that's trying to do everything on their own doesn't have time to reach out and have a conversation, or sit down and have a cup of coffee, or brainstorm an idea, or do an immersion, or just play, and they're exhausted. And here's what's even more nefarious. When they're exhausted, they become bitter and angry and more likely to be agitated and less enjoyable to be around. Because it goes back to The Shining, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, you know? And that's what happens. When I was at the hardest working point of my life, my income wasn't going up. And then all of a sudden I go to Italy for a summer and my income went up that year. My creativity exploded. I came back going, hey, if I focus on quality of life, because this is the secret, this is the sauce that you figured out today, is if life becomes an extension of your own quality of being, business becomes a byproduct of who you are, instead of you becoming enslaved to your business and identifying with what you get. So that's one of the reasons at Free Flow, our biggest recommendation is get a hobby that has nothing to do with money. Because in order to transcend your relationship with money, you have to opt out of the system where you're trading everything for money or doing everything for money. And what happens is that's where you get to your intuition. That's where you let go of worry. That's where you start to find that inner voice. And that inner voice is where all the answers are. The answers are not in a podcast. They're not in listening to, talking heads. They're not in and this is the thing. The reason that everybody's addicted to getting advice is because they don't know how to listen to themselves, and they feel so frustrated and stuck and tired. They're going, please save me, but nobody can save them. They have to save themselves, but they can't save themselves because they're so busy in the trap. And so relationship capital is the key. But the first relationship capital that has to be developed, Caleb, is the relationship to ourselves. And when we get that relationship with ourselves, that we like ourselves, that we'll accept ourselves with our glory and our imperfections. I'm gonna be honest, I've spent a lot of my life judging my body, body dysmorphia, feeling like I couldn't be lovable unless my body was just right, or my hair was just right, whatever it might be, and worried about that, and that's occupying my mind because I thought that's what was gonna make me lovable, or chasing getting Netflix, that's what's gonna make me validated, or all that kind of stuff, rather than saying, if I have a day to do what I want. And the big epiphany for me was in the middle of COVID, Carrie and I came up here to the cabin, and what we did was we got up, I made a latte because the grinder wasn't broken at that time, and we had the latte, and then we went for a walk, and then we sat in the back and had our second latte. And then I made us like a brunch, right? And we just kind of sat out there and ate and talked. And then we took another walk, and then we got on the Can-Am and we drove into town and bought some drinks. And then we came back and we took a nap. And then, and then we sat on the back porch, and then it started to rain a little bit, but it was just a little rain. So then we went for another walk afterwards, and then we built a fire and we sat at the fire and had a conversation. And at the end of the day, she's like, that might've been a top 5 day. And the only thing that cost any real money that day was the Can-Am, and it was the least important thing of the entire day. What was important is we just focused on quality of life. And part of what allowed that to happen is nobody's working that day because of COVID, so there was no stress pulling at me thinking I needed to get anything done, because we've now been programmed Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you've got to be working. And if you're not working, someone else is working, and if you're not getting ahead, they're taking what's yours. That's the lie, is if someone's working, we're not working. It's not just that we're not gonna be okay, it's that we're not gonna be okay because someone else is taking our share, and there's only so much to go around. Even if we wouldn't say and verbalize there's only so much to go around, we believe it at our core level because it's programmed in every TV show, in every single commercial, and everything that our phone tells us, because this phone is just a corporate agenda of what's gonna make us feel that we're not enough, and that if we buy more, we'll feel better. And that buying more makes us feel better temporarily, and then it just fades away. I mean, when I buy a new car, I show everybody that car for a week, and then after the week, nobody else hears about it because the week's over. And even though I love my truck and I enjoy it, it's not like what is never on my list of sustained happiness, right? But it's been programmed that sustained happiness comes from external validation to show people that we're worth something in our stuff. And this is what creates dissonance. And that dissonance, and Corey can go into this too, is it's in everything from the music that we listen to at the rate and frequency it's tuned at to make us feel like we need to be doing something, to just everything in Western culture saying, hey, you got to get it or else someone else will take it or else someone else will have it. And if you don't work and if you don't sacrifice and if you don't hustle, if you don't scrimp, then guess what? You're going to be relegated to a really poor, crappy life and nobody's going to love you. That's the message. I mean, that end is really what people believe, and we wouldn't verbalize it because it's super subconscious and it's not something that we would say, but we can watch and our actions be governed by that. So all this being said, it's exponential when we actually have the faith to develop our mental capital. And our mental capital gets dissuaded and distracted because we look at what other people are good at, and if we're not good at it, it's human nature to be like, oh, dude, that would be really cool if I could do that. And then human nature to be like, well, I'm good at this, but who isn't good at that? And discount what we're good at because we're actually good at it. And then somehow think that we should be good at everything else. And that somehow well-rounded is what it means to do all the right things. And then relationship capital. Relationship capital is a very interesting thing because the more present we are with the relationship, the more powerful that relationship can become, and the more distracted we are in that relationship, the more detriment we can have when we're with that relationship. And one relationship that we don't even know is going to be meaningful from a financial standpoint might be the most meaningful relationship when it's all said and done, simply because of how they show up, how they see you, how they acknowledge you, how they introduce you, and money blinds us to the entire thing. It's one thing to get information, it's another to watch it in action. Wealth Labs gives you that lab feel. You're like, oh, this isn't it right here where something's being cooked up in the financial world, in prosperity, in dissecting what's actually going on. So if you enjoy these conversations and these teachings, well, click onto another video and drop right in for another Wealth Labs episode.